Harold Fannin has been the most overhyped tight end prospect in the 2025 NFL draft. Here's where he realistically should go. Ryan, why is Harold Fannin being overhyped right now in this 2025 class?
I mean, it's production, ultimately, right? Like, he was the leading receiver in all of college football last season, over 1,500 yards, and he did it against pretty good competition last year as well. Like, he had a big game against Penn State. He had a big game against Texas A&M. So we're looking, it's a box score scouting thing for me, Joe. Like, you're looking at the production, but in reality, we need to isolate everything, right? We need to isolate the size, the athleticism, the blocking ability, the all-around play style, and we need to project that to the NFL level. Stop scouting the box score, and let's talk about what Harold Fannin does well and how well it would translate to the NFL level.
His athletic testing was really surprising because I think we were all expecting, hey, this is a great long speed guy. That was how he won. He separated from defenders really easily by picking up speed, and he only ran a 4.71 at the NFL Combine, which was super odd and not a great number for a guy who's on the lighter side for a tight end. He was listed at 6'3", 241 pounds. His testing overall was fine, but I think we were hoping for as dominant as he was in one-on-one situations that he would have been a little bit freakish. You do need to have freakish traits to go on to be a productive tight end and a receiving option in an offense in the NFL. So we need to be a little careful here. He's a day 3 pick. He is best projected as a 4th, 5th round pick with not a ton of great late tight end options that could go on to becoming a quality option in an offense, a good second tight end. I don't really see this projection that some people believe that he is going to be a dominant 1,000-yard tight end like he was in college.
Yeah, I do think that we need to kind of take ourselves back a step for a second, because early on in this process, before the Senior Bowl and before the Combine, there were some people hyping him as tight end 1. There were others just hyping him up to be a top 50 pick. I don't think he's that. I do think that he can be a good role player potentially on the NFL level, and I do think he can be productive in a specific type of setting and a specific type of role. But overall, Joe, the fact that we saw the testing the way it was, I do think that a lot part of that is because he got up to 241 pounds, but he didn't play at 241 pounds, right? Like, he's a smaller tight end. And when you're talking about a smaller tight end who is also a average athlete at an NFL size at 241 pounds after bulking up, I think that that's where you get a little bit of trouble here, right? Like, I do think that he has a role as a potential big slot on the NFL level, but is he going to be a guy that's going to play with his hand in the dirt and going to be an asset in the run game in line? Is he going to be a guy that's going to be incredibly dominant as a pass receiver? I just have my question marks about that and how well it would translate to the NFL level despite a crazy last year of production.
Right. There's a world that I think he could go on to becoming like a 500-600 yard receiver. He could be a team's tight end 1 on their roster. That is all doable for him. But like you just said, where there was this projection by some and a lot of fan projection, which is fine. You know, fans get excited, not knocking them seeing the stats and hoping that it could translate. Him being in the same conversation as Tyler Warren felt really off to me.
Yep.
If we were just want to be more positive, like what are the main strengths that he has that are going to set him up to succeed?
I mean, he's great in space. He's really good. I think he has a really good sense of spacing as far as creating things after the catch. I think he finds cracks in the defense. I think he's really good against zone coverage. I think he's a really smart football player overall. I think he really understands how to get open and to find creases in the defense. So I think that translates both before the catch and after the catch, and as far as finding that open space. But I think that is probably his biggest sell. The other thing I like, Joe, is that he catches the ball cleanly and outside of his frame. Like, I think this is a hands catcher. I think it's a consistent impact against smaller defenders as well. If we're covering him with a safety or maybe even a nickel corner at times, I think he can out leverage and catch the football at the highest point. So I think those natural ball skills and that feel for space are very translatable for a specific role on the NFL level as far as being a space oriented tight ends.
Now, he does have a really unique, interesting background, being a guy who has defeated any odds of expectation of what he was going to do. 0-star recruit. He was a walk-on at Bowling Green. He comes from McKinley High School in Canton, Ohio, and he was originally listed as a linebacker on 247 Sports' website. So there's a bit of a process here where he jumped from being no name to being the most productive receiving option in college football this year.
I mean, it's pretty crazy projection as well, or trajectory, because like you said, he's a 0-star recruit. He's a walk-on. Wore number 44 originally playing tight ends, and then he changed to 0 obviously this past year. But he's a really interesting player because we saw the breakout start to happen in 2023. But Joe, like he went from let's paint the full picture here. He went from 0-star walk-on to the most productive pass catcher in college football this past year. And again, he wasn't doing this just against MAC teams. He was doing this against Penn State, against Texas A&M. So he was playing his best football against some of his highest level of competition that he was playing at Bowling Green this past year. So it's a great story, ultimately, right? Like just kind of taking the story away from the projection and the evaluation for a second. Incredible arc and journey that he has been on. And I'm sure there's going to be some that are going to say, hey, you start in Canton, you got to end up in Canton, right? Like that's probably a little bit of a over the top analysis, right?
Man.
But man, he's a tremendous story. And I ultimately do think he's going to be a good role player on the NFL level. Again, I just think that we need to cite our expectations in the right spot with a Harold Fannin Jr.
And with that in mind, the easy comparison for him, we really like Gerald Everett, who was once a Los Angeles Rams selection in the second round, which Fannin could still end up going in the end of the second round for a team that values his skill set. Another guy who was a small school player, a good linear athlete, was able to win in contested situations despite being on the smaller side for a tight end. And his overall production in the NFL is exactly what we're projecting here for Fannin. He has mostly had 400-yard receiving seasons. His career high was 555 yards and 4 touchdowns. If Harold Fannin becomes that, that's a great NFL career. And I think that is what is, again, to say realistic for the 10th time, the realistic goal and path for him, rather than saying he is going to be a 1,000-yard receiver.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about Harold Fannin on the next level, you're thinking about an H-back, right? A guy that's going to be used more in space as the tight end. And Gerald Everett is obviously a guy that has made a living off of that and been a pretty solid contributor on the NFL level. I think Jonnu Smith is another one that kind of comes to mind as far as like those space-oriented tight ends. I really like Gerald Everett, though, because Gerald Everett was one of those guys that was really sneaky after the catch, could break some tackles, and he also had some really good feel for space. So as that modern West Coast H-back, right? A guy that is going to get a lot of slides, a guy that's going to work off of play action, the guy that is you're going to get into space and have him be a yards after catch receiver. I think that is what ultimately Harold Fannin's skill set lends best to. An after catch oriented tight end that does a really good job of evaluating and manipulating space.
Folks, hit that like button and subscribe and let us know below, what team do you want to see Harold Fannin play for? We'll talk to you later.